When I saw your request to deep dive into the hidden costs of success, I knew we were in for a really fascinating conversation.
Yeah, it's a bit like we're also focused on the climb, but no one really tells you what the view from the top is actually like.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're checking out this podcast episode called Behind the Highlight Reel.
Okay.
It's got all these stories from celebrities, expert opinions, and even some analysis of pop culture.
Interesting. So what's their take on this whole success thing?
Well, right off the bat, they hit you with this big question like, what even is success, right?
Yeah.
Because society seems to have this pretty standard checklist, right? Money, status, power.
Right. The usual.
Yeah. The usual suspects. So do you feel that pressure to kind of tick those boxes? What does success even look like to you?
Well, I think that's a question we should all be asking ourselves, honestly.
For sure.
Because as this podcast points out, there's research that shows that once you hit a certain income level, right, more money doesn't actually equal more happiness.
Yeah, it's almost like our brains get kind of hooked on that dopamine rush of achieving something.
Yeah.
But then that satisfaction fades and we're just left wanting more.
Totally. And they actually use the term success as an addiction in the podcast, which I find really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Because it really is true that our reward systems are kind of wired to crave that next win, that next achievement.
Right.
And it can become this never-ending cycle,
When you're chasing this feeling.
Yeah.
But the podcast is saying it can come at a cost.
Yeah.
And to highlight this, they bring up some high-profile examples like Demi Lovato and Chadwick Boseman.
Right.
Both incredibly successful in their fields, but also battling these internal struggles that the public never really saw.
And what struck me about those examples and the Elon Musk burnout story that they talked about was this common thread of immense pressure. These are people who are celebrated for pushing boundaries, right? But that constant drive to achieve can have some pretty serious consequences.
Like this pressure cooker effect, right? And the podcast really dives into the mental health side of it all, too. They bring in a psychologist, Dr. Jane Rivera, who talks about how success can actually breed a fear of failure.
That's such a good point. Because when your identity gets tied to your achievements, the thought of not measuring up can be really scary.
Absolutely. And Dr. Rivera also mentions how this fear can lead to people seeking constant validation from others.
Right.
And kind of neglecting their own needs in the process.
It's a vicious cycle. Achieve, seek validation, fear, failure, repeat.
Right.
And the podcast argues that this can contribute to anxiety addiction, even like a loss of identity.
Wow.
It makes you wonder if in some cases we're sacrificing our well-being for the sake of success.
Yeah. And speaking of sacrifice, they use the example of Michael Phelps.
Right.
Olympic champion, broke all the records. But even he struggled with really profound depression after the games to the point of contemplating suicide.
Yeah, his story really drives home the idea that conventional markers of success don't really protect you from inner turmoil. And it makes you think, if someone at the pinnacle of achievement can experience that kind of darkness, what does that say about our definition of success?
I think that's where the podcast's call to redefine success comes in. They encourage listeners to ask themselves, is it really about the numbers, the titles, the external validation, or is it about something deeper?
It's a question worth thinking about for sure.
Definitely.
They're challenging us to consider what truly brings us fulfillment, right? Is it peace of mind, meaningful relationships, a sense of purpose beyond just achievement?
Yeah, they make a really good point. If success comes at the cost of your well-being, is it really worth it?
And that brings us to their next piece of advice, setting boundaries. They talk about pushing back against the hustle culture mentality that glorifies overwork and sacrifice.
And I love how they quote Brene Brown on this. You can't hate yourself into a better life.
Yeah.
That really stuck with me.
It's such a powerful message, especially when we're talking about success. We often think we need to push ourselves to the limit, even punish ourselves to achieve our goals. But this podcast reminds us that self-compassion is so crucial.
Absolutely. And they tie that into their final point about embracing imperfection. They talk about J.K. Rowling's story, how she faced a ton of rejections before making it big with Harry Potter.
Such a good reminder that setbacks are part of the journey for everyone.
Yeah, no matter how successful we become.
Totally.
It's like they're using her story to talk about the growth mindset.
Yeah, that's the idea that challenges are actually like opportunities for learning and stuff.
Right. It kind of makes you think about all those people who are really successful now who probably wouldn't be where they are without, those so-called failures along the way.
Oh, totally. And the podcast episode ends with this call to action, asking listeners to share their own definitions of success, in the comments.
Oh, cool. It's like they're saying, okay, we've given you all this to think about now. Go and apply it to your own life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It encourages a deeper level of engagement. It's not just listening passively. It's about actively reflecting on what success means to you.
So we'd love to hear from you too. What stood out to you from what we've been talking about? What questions came up? What does success even look like in your world?
Yeah, because as we're learning, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing,
Sure.
It's about finding what truly brings you meaning and fulfillment.
And that might mean challenging those conventional ideas of success that we've been told our whole lives.
Exactly. It's about taking a more holistic approach, considering not just your achievements, but also your well-being, your relationships, your sense of purpose.
And that whole highlight reel metaphor they use really hit home for me.
Oh, yeah, it's a good one. It reminds us that we're often only seeing a carefully curated snapshot of someone's life, not the whole picture.
It's like comparing ourselves to an Instagram feed,
Right, exactly.
We're only seeing the best angles, the perfectly filtered moments.
And that can give us these totally unrealistic expectations.
Right.
Because we're not seeing the struggles, the sacrifices, the doubts, all the setbacks that are actually a part of every journey.
And, the more successful someone seems on the outside, the easier it is to fall into that trap of thinking they have it all figured out.
Which can be so discouraging.
Yeah.
Because if we buy into that illusion of effortless success, then we start believing that our own struggles mean we're doing something wrong.
Right. And the podcast episode also mentions how important it is to set boundaries, especially in a culture that celebrates overwork and hustle and all that.
It's so easy to get caught up in that always-on mentality, right? Like we always need to be striving and producing.
Right.
But they say rest and rejuvenation aren't just nice to haves, they're crucial for our well-being.
And I think that ties into their point about not tying your self-worth to your accomplishment.
Totally. When your identity is based only on what you achieve, the fear of failure can be paralyzing.
It's like you're constantly worried about losing that validation from outside,
And that can lead to this cycle of constantly chasing the next goal, never feeling satisfied with what you've already done.
It's like running on a treadmill,
Yeah.
You're going through the motions, but not getting anywhere.
Exactly. Which is why they emphasize the importance of building a sense of self-worth that comes from within.
Right.
It's about recognizing your value as a person, regardless of what you achieve.
It makes me think about how we often talk about success as this upward climb, this constant push to reach the top.
Yeah, and this podcast challenges that image. They suggest that maybe the real deep dive isn't about climbing higher externally, but going deeper internally.
So instead of focusing on external achievements, maybe the key to lasting happiness is understanding ourselves better.
Yeah.
Exploring our values, our motivations, our fears.
Yeah, it's like they're saying the real journey isn't about reaching some mountaintop out there, but exploring the depths of who we are.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like it's about understanding our own inner world, right? Our values, our motivations, what we're afraid of.
And maybe, just maybe, that's where we actually find the key to lasting fulfillment.
As we've been talking about all of this, I keep coming back to that idea of honoring the human behind the hustle.
Oh, yeah, that's good. It's like a good reminder that behind every success story, there's a person.
Right.
With their own unique journey. Their struggles, their wins.
Yeah. It's a good way to remember that success isn't just some abstract idea out there. It's about real people living real lives and trying to figure out this whole success thing.
And at the end of the day, it's about defining success on your own terms, right? Like what feels authentic to you, what makes you happy, what makes you come alive.
It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else expects from us.
Yeah.
Like what society says success should look like.
Yeah. But this podcast is encouraging us to break free from all of that.
For sure.
To find a path that really fits with our own values and dreams.
And to remember that it's not just about the destination, right? It's also about how we get there.
Exactly. It's about enjoying the process, embracing the challenges, learning from the times we mess up.
And realizing that real success isn't something we do alone. We're all in this together.
Helping each other along the way.
So as you continue to figure out your own definition of success.
Because we all are, right?
Yeah, totally. As you're navigating that journey, just remember to be kind to yourself. Embrace the highs and the lows and celebrate the small wins along the way.
Because maybe the most successful thing we can do is live a life that feels true to who we are.
I think that's a great place to leave it. What do you think?
I agree completely. And to our listener, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What really resonated with you today? What questions came up for you? And most importantly, what does success mean to you? let us know.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah.
And until next time, keep exploring.